Hey everybody, it is the evening time here on January 7th. Welcome back to the channel. There's a lot going on in the news, as we know. I've got the Trump article, this Trump tweet article from Zero Hedge pulled up because we've got World War III memes going on all over the world. We've got the Australia stuff happening. And this is actually going to be kind of like a supplement video, in fact, to the one I did just a couple days ago about the Space Force, about all the changes coming in 2020, because, oh my God, it's off to an incredibly ridiculously hyperbolic start. Let me just, or and there's a lot of numerology that I have been seeing in relation to the steganography that we've been doing. And the numerology stuff, the Gematria, is not something we've gotten in too much yet on this channel. It's not something I necessarily intend on getting too deeply in because there are those that have an eye for it, have a lot more, get a lot more enjoyment out of that type of decoding, I guess, than I do. But I do want to cover a lot of what I do see, at least in some of the Gematria, some of the numerology in the last couple days, because it's just everywhere. And it does relate to the V and lambda steganography that I have come to kind of base everything in this channel around anyway. So I'm going to show how that all relates, even paint some pictures a little bit more clearly that didn't maybe get the attention that they should have on the last video, but this all relates, and somehow, again, going along with the theme of 2020 being year zero, being that year where there's a lot of things that are going to kick off what are going to be called the soaring 20s, as Cliff Highs called them. The roaring 20s meme is everywhere, if you guys have seen it going into this new year. That means, of course, economic explosions and both bad and good. And we're going to get into some of how I see the ritualistic aspect of the occult playing out right in front of us. Just like the last video, there's going to be a lot to do with the secret space program now made public. Now it's the Space Force, the technology that's going to come out there, kind of the replacement and usurpation of that dark government now placing itself over the top of the previously known public government. Old guard versus new, right? The new guard taking over. Were they controlled by the same people? That's kind of what we investigate on this channel, right? Like I strongly suspect the ancient alien contingent has a lot to do with this. Whatever power vacuums along the way. We've talked about Yahweh and not really filled in a ton of the other thousands of years of history from since then to now. So that's not a topic that I'm going to suppose on yet until we've gone and looked at some more material in that regard. But let this video be kind of a supplement. There's going to be some football stuff in here because the NFL playoffs are going on, and it's an easy thing to decode Gematria with to show the viewer if they've never seen what this kind of looks like in practice. There's a lot of stuff going on with that freaking game, and like I said, Marshawn Lynch going back to the Seahawks. Though I don't watch football any longer, everybody I know is from Seattle. So anyway, this will be interesting. So we've kind of started off on the theme of this the war starting off, and what I'm going to be doing is tying it all back around because there's some interesting stuff in aerospace. Boeing in Seattle, of course, and then and these articles are all from today, by the way, in Zero Hedge. Boeing soared this morning in the Dow Jones Industrial Average to a position of $5 billion on a rumor that Warren Buffett was going to be investing. This buoyed the Dow Jones today, at least from crashing more than it did, which if you go over here, you can see 119 points is how much it dropped. I'm going to get to this in a sec too and tie all this stuff. This is all the numerology stuff I'm going to be getting into today and how it ties into V and 5. This number 17, like we also recognized last time, that ties with the Hebrew letter He, which we were talking about, of course, the fifth letter in the alphabet of the Hebrew alphabet, that is. So we're going to talk about some of these numbers. We're going to see 5, 17, 24, of course, because of Marshawn Lynch, some 22s in here. These numbers all have different significant values. They're like musical notes. So don't think that, just because one number isn't strictly consistent throughout this whole ritual, that it's not consistent with something. Because if you examine gematria with headlines of news, if you examine it with scores of football game, you'll notice that the patterns consist, that this stuff is definitely done by code. It's likely rigged. Vegas always wins, right? In the sports book, this is kind of the code that they have to do it by if they're going to put their spell out as they have to with the occult for the public to see. In order for it to bind to the mind, in order for that meme to potentially take hold, that thought contagion, it's gotta be put into plain sight. So this is how they do it. This is kind of one of those basic occult practices, I think, that we can all start to get a better understanding of. But before we get back to how all these numbers and how this what I like to call war would be corporate interest theater. If I'm going to call sports athletic theater, then the theater of war is corporate interest theater. But let's get grounded again before we get into the topics. Ahriman, my suppositions are, still controls the Earth grid network. We've talked about how the moon factors into this probably. If we're going to go back to the lectures of Rudolf Steiner and the Eighth Sphere, and of course, as we've talked about in extensive format in a couple other videos, my supposition is the Eighth Sphere is being controlled, or is controlling rather, the Earth grid network that we've got crystalline underlaid underneath the crustal formations that are on the top layer of our Earth, right? And along with all the inventions of Nikola Tesla, he figured out how to manipulate the ionosphere with this stuff. You just extrapolate this out. Animal magnetism, manipulation of the mind, is just field perturbations. If you can manipulate a magnetic field of a, let me just say, artificial magnetic field around the Earth, which I suppose is what Ahriman has done ever since maybe prior to the fall of Atlantis, if I'm putting together my timelines correctly. We've got to do something about this, in my opinion. And that's where all this is tied back to, right? And there's not going to be any action items we can take to remove the moon or anything like this, but at least arm ourselves with the knowledge of what's happening. And so if this is all theater, orchestrated to get loose, like there's some stuff that you got to understand about our world. Like nothing is what it seems, right? We also covered this image in the last video where I was supposing the SEAHAWKS and the bomber, and the B-2 bomber, that is, there's a steganography in the form factor of the jet itself. And I looked more into this, and of course we're seeing a lot more of these bomber references, and I'll show you more of how this factors into the playoffs. And we're actually gonna get there here through football. So I also referenced again this video in the last one I did, the last YouTube video that I did anyway. I recommend everybody watch this talk that Stephen Quast did at Hillsdale College, because it really, between the lines, he's one, again, that's a deep state general who's been allowed to speak on the topics of the technology that they'll be bringing into the public, because they need to sell something into the economic collapse that I suspect that they don't have any other way out of. And that's kind of where we're going to get into the topics of tonight, and how football, the secret space program made public into the Space Force, the recent war with Iran now, and then the fires in Australia, how all of these things have a common thread, a common ritual all through the numerology that were happening upon this. And there's no mistaking, I wanted to get this out on the 7th today, because this is all convening on the 7th. There's a bunch of numerology that matches up with 1-7. Again, just like we were talking about here, with the 5th letter of the alphabet, He, which is V steganography. V is the Roman numeral 5. 5 is the 5th letter of this alphabet. Of course, we know Q is the number 17, so this is all wrapped up in there. And the X17 particle, anyway, there's a whole other video I did a couple days ago on this. But as far as we're concerned with today, what we're seeing through the numerology is the mass manipulation of the media to occlude the facts of the economic collapse, and to include the facts that exotic technologies, let's just call them, are coming out into our prescient consciousness as a people. We're going to start off with a lot of the Glass-Steagall Act was one of the things that FDR did to bring the country out of the last Great Depression. And what it did was it separated investment banking from retail banking. It made it to where sales of stocks would be organized into what we now call IPOs, which was a much more methodical process of launching an effort to make sure there was more compliance behind it. By separating the two, the retail banks were prohibiting from using depositors' funds for risky investments, and only 10% of their income could come from selling securities. So it limited the corporation's power to speculate in the open market in the securities exchanges. And this was, well, I mean, take it or leave it. It was what it was. This was all orchestrated as well, of course. Another act in the script, but it was one of those things that people in the financial field will debate all day long about. Oh, this is what it was, what it wasn't. I want people to take a look at what it was called, for one, because we're talking about steganography here, and also some of these key dates. May 25th, 1933 is when it was passed. And this is where we're going to get our first clue into where we're going with this. May 25th, there's 5 steganography, V steganography in there. May is the 5th month. 25 is 5 times 5. 5 squared, 5, 2. So 5 squared has a representative relationship with 25 in a couple of different ways, because 5 times 5 equals 25. But 5 squared, if you can picture the 5 with the exponent of 2 next to it, also looks like a big 5 or little 2, 52. And this is going to factor in a little bit with what I'm going to go into next with the Super Bowl 52, the Eagles. We'll get there, but this is, and again, we were talking about the Seahawks last time. The Seahawks just played the Eagles. It's a little bit of a preamble. You guys might be able to tell of where we're headed here. The next thing to check out with Glass-Steagall is it sought to permanently end the bank runs, which is the popularized cause of the Great Depression. It's probably the thing that everybody points to that doesn't know the exact causes of economics and how Keynesianism was bleeding into the economy like a cancer to eliminate the Austrian policies that were in place. This is a much more complex issue, but so we're just going to say it was passed. It was a reform system, and it destroyed 4,000 banks in the process. Something that wasn't allowed to happen in 2008. Another thing here's our second bit of numerology. We're going to pocket the little bit here that is November 12th, because there is a 1-2 and we've got 2-1 and 1-2 numerology in this as well, where the Seahawks have 2-1 and 1-2 numerology all over their history, all over their scores. This is to say, there is a high propensity that the Seahawks will have many 21s and 12s in their statistics for games, and it's a really common score for them to score in a game too. 21 is, along with some of the other numbers which Gematria shows. Anyway, so what I want everybody to know about this is it happened in 1933, okay? And everything happens with numerology by ritual. And there's another, let's see here. I guess I don't have it up. Eagles, 1933. The Eagles were also inaugurated, is the right word I'm looking for, in 1933. And they had these, and this was all over the NFL this year, I guess, because I've seen people wear these things around. The established year of the team has been all over these hats this year. It's been the biggest thing in the NFL. So you see the 1933. I've seen people here in Phoenix, quite a few Eagles fans for whatever reason, they've seen wear these things. But so that was the significance the 1933 matching up, of course, with these events of Glass-Steagall. This supposedly act that went into place to protect the American public and the banks. So it's the first thing in the securities industry that kind of set us off on our paradigm that we're in. Either way, we're going to talk a little bit about because of the 52 and the 25 that we saw in 1933. The Eagles are now connected with that common thread of 1933 being the year they were again inaugurated. Let's go back to Super Bowl 52, where again the 52-25 of the May 5th, 25th, or the May 25th. First plays in, of course, because 52 is the Super Bowl that was played this year. And how you shorthand years, of course, 1933, they beat the New England Patriots with a score of 33, and played the game in US Bank Stadium, which is just like this. It's made of glass. Are you guys seeing some of this weird stuff that the occult puts into this? We're talking about Glass-Steagall. Talking about 1933, with Glass-Steagall was implemented. 1933 is the year the Eagles were founded. They won the Super Bowl in a glass stadium called US Bank Stadium. This is a banking ritual. And the stadium's made out of glass. Ridiculous, right? Well, no more ridiculous than the team actually merging with the Pittsburgh Steelers for the 1943 season because of the war. Because there were apparently too many of the football players were going off to war, got drafted into the war, left for war. What do we have? These common themes around the economic turmoil, but I kid you not, their name was the Steagals. So you've got the Glass-Steagall Act. While it's not spelled the same, this is still what they do. It's got the same harmonic quality to it, right? If it doesn't have the exact same spelling. The U.S. Bank Stadium, where the Eagles won their last Super Bowl, number 52, where we're starting to already see some of this 52 numerology creep itself in, and the Steagals merged in response to the war, in 1941. And of course, what was the score that the Eagles got in the Super Bowl 52? You see how this works, guys? This is just a preamble into a primer, not a preamble, a primer. Let me get my language correct about how to start looking into some of this stuff for yourself, because getting down the weeds in this stuff kind of taxes me out to the point where I don't have enough time to read new stuff and pack my brain with more. So, I don't have too big of an audience to encourage to go do this stuff and make any sort of an impact. But hey, if this kind of thing at least entertains you, it's worth looking at for yourself too. So we're going to tie the Eagles into the Seahawks here in a sec, but because we were on the Patriots theme, I also wanted to show, because there's going to be a 9/11 ritual that also pops up from within the game, the Seahawks game, which kind of ties into today. Today's again the 17 5 is tied in with that. You're starting to see all the threads, and we've got a 119 in the stock market drop, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, that is. Why was that important? Because Boeing was soaring today, and if they didn't soar, that would have dropped more. So you see how Boeing's tied in with this now, with a $5 billion proposition. And now we're going to hit back again to this story I got today. There were 52 stealth fighter jets, elephant walk in a show of force amid the threats of war. So this elephant walk, of course, is as you see it. This is a scramble drill where these F-35 jets are all going off in pattern, where they're all taken off like 4 at a time, and they're in timed kind of succession with one another. And you've got between 12 and 15 second interval for takeoff. So you've got the B-52 bombers, so there's more 52 jet stealth fighters today. Again, stealth fighter jets, and they're the F-35 Lightning IIs. And this is interesting steganography to me. I may be reading into this one too much, but our friend Nikola Tesla, of course, I forget where I pulled up his image here. You guys are going to see all the stuff that I'm pulling up here. There he is. My favorite meme on the planet. You guys have seen it many times. If this is not your first time to this channel, and I suppose, right, what this Lightning II moniker, because every time before it was like Tomcat, Raptor, Hornet. There's different call signs that were, creatures. Now it's a Lightning. And they've got different, this is just a deployment package. The F-35 actually has different deployment packages. It's a kind of like modular jet that you can sell, I guess, where different, weapons arrangements and arrays can be put onto it, different stealth arrangements, etc. The Lightning II is the one that this is at Hill Air Force Base from Utah, where this exercise was being conducted. I actually think that's a small call, again, to this 2020 new paradigm we're going to be on. Lightning 2.0, the electric grid we should have had when Nikola Tesla first gave us field theory and ether physics and set us on the course of torsion fields and figuring out, how to manipulate things from the free energy realm, instead of this false paradigm we're on and seem to, well, it's not a false paradigm, but egregiously simplistic and troglodytic paradigm that we're on. But anyway, that's my little guess as to what is going on there. I may be wrong about this, but it's undeniable that the 52s are all over this. So this is one thing that's obviously happening in this theater of war and the response to of the missiles. But I digress. We're going to head back to the 9/11 thing. Let me see if I'm going to get a copyright claim if they pick up the sound on this. So what I'm going to show you here is actually the original 9/11 ritual that got Tom Brady, number 12, another number 12, into the NFL in the first place. And this has to do with taking Drew Bledsoe out. As you see, they're playing the Jets. So Drew Bledsoe drops back to pass. He's running around the edge here. Boom, there it is. 2 Jets players combined to take him out. 2 Jets players combined to take out number 11, Drew Bledsoe. If you guys saw this, right? He gets kind of schmammered by these 2 guys and gets laid out, and then he's done. And then they're interviewing him and stuff, and there he is. And then Tom Brady steps in. Oh my God, he's so good. Anyway, what happened there was a 9/11 ritual. The 2 ones on his back, number 11, Twin Towers, 2 Jets hit him. He gets taken out. Number 12, Tom Brady gets put in. The U.S. Patriot Act is instituted the next week after all this too. So you guys see how the Patriots then, the archetype was tied to the numerology, and the ritual, the occult ritual unfolds and it right in front of everybody. Nobody ever even sees it. And they were actually forecasting that 9/11 was going to happen. This play happens before 9/11 happens. The Patriot Act happens after Tom Brady comes in, starts the new Patriot era. And I don't think, by the way, I was looking into some of the news for the playoffs this year, and because of all the Seahawks stuff, and it looks like the Patriots lost the day that, I guess on the 5th or the 4th. I think they played on the 4th, actually. So 1-4 lines up with, of course, the reverse of 4-1. And we're going to see some other 1-4s here as well in the ritual, because Russell Wilson's like number 1 target, I think, in the game. Like the wide receiver was number 14 in the Seahawks game even. I think we're going to confirm that in a second. But yeah, this is the this is the Seahawks game that we're going to go through. But anyway, that there was, of course, pointed out to me by Zach Hubbard, and I'm going to link a couple more of his 9/11 decodes that he's done here with some more numerology stuff, so you guys can kind of see not only what he can decode with 9/11 itself, but this post that he did is all about tying it to the leasing acts, more banking stuff. Basically, they like the elite like to use 9/11 a lot for different things, and I'm going to show that also by the end of this video that ties in more than just this National Disaster Day. It factored in 2008 for the financial collapse, which all goes back to this Glass-Steagall deal, and it all factored in this last year, 2019, in what we're in the repo crisis. So I'll link this stuff. Dr. Judy Wood is also somebody you need to look at in terms of directed energy weapon research, cold fusion, and what likely took down the Twin Towers. The evidence is all there. This, by the way, may or may not be what's causing the fires in Australia. We have people, of course, setting them, we've heard. But we'll get to that in a second. I truly, actually, I think directed energy weapons were involved in California, but I'm not convinced they're part of what's happening in Australia. But it also doesn't mean that the same people aren't involved. And that's what gets so conflating about these things, is people get pitted against each other. This happened, no, this happened. It's really not about that. It's about picking all of this stuff apart and figuring out what is happening so we can stop it, because it isn't about the CO2 carbon credits. I can tell you that. Hint, hint. Anyway, we're going to pick this game apart now, because the stuff in this game that relate to all of this fall of the financial system, potentially, in my opinion, that's what's happening, and the insertion of the new technology, of course, we know is hidden behind steganography. All this ether technology, all this ether physics, all of the Nikola Tesla science paradigm is hidden behind that steganography, and all of the Neoplatonic stuff and the Aristotelian old Greek knowledge is hidden right in view. So it's going to be, again, 1 7s. It's going to be 2 4s and 4 2s. I think the 1 4 is in this too. I'll show you how all this stuff ties up with the Gematria when we show the Gematria calculator after this. But I marked a couple of things here. So at the 30-second mark, we're only going to show a couple things because that's all that's relevant. But by the way, you've got this number 25 guy that was also in the backfield with Marshawn Lynch. So there's another 25 reference in this, but I don't see that he played a huge part in the game or anything. But this play meant that they had to kick a field goal. Okay, you've got number 5 and number 4 down here, which this is, I think. And I guess this is the number. I'm getting confused because number 4 used to be their kicker when I was actually watching the game. But number 5 is their kicker, right? So we're going to get the ball snapped, and he's actually going to get the kick blocked. It's a 35-yard attempt, and the kick is blocked. So this is kind of one of those things that happens in a game too, where if you've got two factions that are representing things, and I think in this game, the Eagles represent kind of the original founding father way of the country, right? And it's like the old empire versus the new empire. I think the Seahawks may represent in this particular contest or athletic theater contest. They may indeed represent, like I'm supposing, the secret space technology because of all of the things that are tied to the Hawk in the Skunkworks programs. And the fact that the B-2 bomber is in fact its form factor is steganography for a Hawk. And anyway, if this kick gets blocked, 35 is an interesting figure because of the F-35 jets. It was just an interesting call out that I wanted to show as an example of how on field plays can happen where this actually was planned to get blocked. All the stuff on the field, by the way, everything is. That's why they call it practice, I surmise. That's why I think there's all this, not probably a bunch of NDAs in their contracts. What's in that contract that they sign? Anyway, so look out for stuff like this. I don't have time to go into the whole lesson. That's why I'm always just gonna reference Zach Hubbard's channel. He goes into the sports stuff. I don't have freaking time for this. But the next one was like the very next play, I guess. So we'll just hit this. And this is actually where the 9/11 ritual happens for this game. So you've got another number 11 quarterback. And this is, again, where the 9/11 ritual is going to tie up with the markets today. It has something to do with the economic collapse of 2008 and also this last 2019, September 11th, which I'll show you, I suspect is the beginning of the decline for the current economic collapse that we're in. But on with the play here. Carson Wentz is his name. He's number 11. He's scrambling around here. And then you've got this guy, this number 90 guy, who's coming right after him. And this doesn't look that brutal because it's not. But bam, he kind of like lands on top of him. And this is all an act. I don't think Carson Wentz is actually injured. But man, he's like, oh, and he gets up and, you know, I think this is what they do. They kind of act more hurt than they actually are. These guys have all pads on. He didn't land on that bad. And you do see that 9/11 though is clearly represented here. Again, the paradigm break. It's like because 0 doesn't matter in numerology. 0 gets canceled out, so you literally have the 9/11. And if this game is truly indicating that the new paradigm is taking over the old, then this was what kind of stood out to me as what the ritual is doing here at large. Then at the 4-minute mark, some interesting stuff occurred here. We get this big play. This number 14 guy, Metcalf, he's the one that Russell Wilson was hooking up with and got, I guess I didn't look at all the statistics, but he had like the best day ever for a rookie player in the playoffs, or a rookie wide receiver. And so they come up to the line here, and so check it out. This is interesting too, right? We got 1st and goal from the 5-yard line. And I didn't see if the 1-1-1 had much to do with it. 1-1-0 more has to do with 9/11 than 1-1-1 does. But I think that's what I was kind of in debate about was when the ball got snapped. It got handed off to Marshawn Lynch at 1:10. I don't know. Sometimes the clocks are involved here, but the point is Marshawn Lynch gets the ball and boom, here he goes. This is classic beast mode, man, and he makes it in for the touchdown, right? And everybody's stoked. But it was a 5-yard run, and it was like the classic beast mode, right? Everybody remembered Skittles were thrown at him and things like that. So anyway, basically all the way up until the last play here. I think it was like here. This was semi-interesting to me because they nailed this number 14 guy again, and it was exactly 1:40 left on the clock when he did this. And so the 14 played in a little bit here to this too, it looks like. Of course, by the time the timeout gets called, it's 1:37, which is the 33rd prime number. We didn't get into a ton of this stuff last week because again, it just gets deep. But Marshawn Lynch is 33 years old now, you know. So anyway, what you can take away from that are some numbers. We got a 1-4 in play. We've got the 24 in play. We've got the 21 and 12 is in play. We've got the 35 maybe because of the blocked field goal. But I found this article because it had some of these numbers kind of cataloged within it. the 33-year-old Marshawn Lynch, which we just talked about, the one which was why that 137, which was last time out of the game, was taken for 710 ESPN Seattle, which is the local sports radio station up there. It has been for years. It's the AM sports radio station since I was a kid. It wasn't always ESPN, but it also, if you look at it, because 17's in place, 71, the reverse aspect, is also in place, similar harmonic there. We then go down to the timeline again, and this is where it gets interesting. The two things that are of consequence are the last time Marshawn Lynch played and his retirement that year, of when he was announcing, to leave the team. And then, of course, when he came back this year. There's probably a ton more numerology in here that lines up with a bunch of other stuff. Again, I'm just picking the stuff here that I see are the consequential things for him leaving the Seahawks that are going to be part of the ritual of him coming back. And again, we have a 5 steganography. We have 5, 5. 5 times 5, 25. But 5 May is the 5th month of the year, obviously. And then here we've got another 17. And more importantly, we've got a 117, because January is also the first month of the year. So you have 117. Now is where it gets kind of nuts, because one of the things we've got here to look into, to look at who might be playing in the Super Bowl, are the 22 rituals and the 43 rituals, because this is another thing I showed you guys on the last time. Is one of the things they look into, one of the things that's coded into these things are the dates and the times. Of course, we've got Super Bowl 54, so 5-4 is going to factor into this as well. So are the Seahawks going to be in the Super Bowl? I don't know. We also have another thing I was looking at just in general, something I would do when I was looking into this, is the coordinates. So we've got the 25 degrees on Miami. Well, if there are a lot of 25s that are lining up, and they're lining up in a specific way, then you know that you can like project the outcome of these games, right? You're starting to see maybe how this kind of works. More to my point of why I truly believe that the Seahawks represent the deep state government skunkworks programs is because of all this stuff. Again, there's the 117 that we saw in the article with Marshawn Lynch when he left the Seahawks last. And of course, this plane left service to make way for the F-22. And the F-22, if you're looking at the Super Bowl date and reading it as 2-2, 2020, or a bunch of 2-2s here. So it left service, right? And it retired in 2008 predominantly to make way for the and what's interesting is we've got one that was shot down in 1999 by a surface-to-air missile. What happened in 1999 as well? Bill Clinton repealed Glass-Steagall. He shot down the bill that, then kept it, and then things didn't really fall apart again until 2008, 2009. But it was because Glass-Steagall was repealed largely that credit default swaps and derivative securities could get put into existence, where you've got all these counterparties mixed up, nobody knows what they own, things fall apart. And instead of having a situation like they did in 1933, where they just let 4,000 banks fail, we had too big to fail banks, right? I wonder if some of this stuff is like, it's going to be, I've already typed in a couple things, too big to fail. Yeah, I don't see anything on that one. But anyway, I'm just, I hope I'm slowly making my points clear here, guys, that the gematria and the numerology absolutely factor into the steganography piece too. It's kind of like hand in glove with plugging into the steganography piece. And we usually just cover the surface level stuff well, actually not the surface level stuff. The Gematria is more the surface level stuff. We cover usually the more contextual stuff, I should rather say, because it's more interesting. This stuff helps you piece together the puzzles on the top, but it doesn't have a lot of emphasis on the what's happening beneath the surface, unless you really have an eye for it. And that's why, this stuff, if you become good at this stuff, the other deeper occult stuff becomes more clear to you. So that's what I will say. But I also brought up the F-22 Raptor because it, of course, is still in service and flies alongside the F-35, but its last day delivery was 2012. Also, you can there's another 12. There's 12 for shorthand, right? The fact that this is all happening all at the same time, this is kind of where it gets like that's all well and good, right? So I think by bringing in the case of the Gematria first, I guess, before we make, here's kind of where I'm getting at this. Here's some terms I've used, and most of what we've covered so far in this video. V for the number 5 I plugged in, and I only kept the four main ciphers here. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. You can see right down here, 1 through 26, A through Z, and then full reduction. On full reduction, Z equals 8 because it's the numbers of this is the rules of numerology. Reverse, just put Z at the beginning of the alphabet, and this is also the rules of numerology, but with reverse alphabet. So these are the main 4 ciphers that the elite, whoever makes these codes, uses, to plug into the media. And you see that this is an ancient Hebrew practice. That's why it's so important as it relates to this stuff, because this is all Hebrew practices. And it's just been transplanted on top of English language. And I've got some of these terms in here, and you start to see with the regularity. Here's the backwards. I should make this yellow. There's the backwards 24, because we've seen a lot of the 24 rituals, of course, in the Dow Jones. There's the 12. We've got Soleimani, the guy who's killed. Again, if we're looking at the Marshawn Lynch timeline, we've got the 22. I just put stealth in here because all the stealth jets, B2, I should put like B-52 in here too as well to see what that's all about. I don't see anything on that one actually. Oh, there's a 14 there. There is one. So you see, it's just F-35. There's the 14 again with the number 1 target for. So clearly, the Seahawks, to me, it's very apparent that they're tied to this ritual, and it would make sense that they are because of the Boeing news today. Seattle is where Boeing is at. Their famous Boeing Seahawks plane. They made this thing. Yeah, 747. The Seahawks on it with the 12, right? The number 12 for fan. That's the other thing we got to put in here to the Gematrinator is fan is 12 and 21. But 5 is 20. Just the number. Just the 5 spelled out is 42 and 24 and 21. It's interesting. I also saw that B, just the letter B, because of the B2, because in numerology you typically don't put these numbers in there, but because they're the models of the jets, they do apply. There's a 41, the reverse of, for the stealth. Anyway, you guys kind of see how this works, right? Zach actually did a brilliant job the entirety of the season that we referenced, the Steagall season, the Eagles Super Bowl season, where he cataloged since the beginning of the season that it was all about Flag Day, it was all about Trump's inauguration, 239, having to lines up, the number 239 lines up with the Eagles, the dress where the flag was originally sewn, Trump's inauguration day, brilliant stuff, but it's just, it doesn't have anything to do with the V steganography. So we're going to transition back out of here. You guys saw this in the last video. What we didn't look at entirely, though, was Lockheed Martin's logo. And I want you guys to draw attention to this because we do a lot of stuff with V-steganography, the pentagram, the pentagon. The pentagon is where the military launches all these attacks from, of course, the DC parasite network. Everybody's probably intimately familiar with at this point. But we've got two V's, or a lambda and a V, however you want to put it, but we've got two of them. We've got a lambda and a V sitting right here, plain as day, in the Lockheed Martin logo. And this is just another one of those things that, of course, they're the ones that made the F-17 Nighthawk and F-22 Raptor. So this is kind of the thing where, here, we'll go back to the Deagle numbers. You guys have seen these. There are some interesting things in the critical thinking video that Cliff High did today. And here's where it is here, where he's talking about another 17-year cycle here that I want to get to. But earlier in the day, he did this report. These are both the videos that he did today, actually, and or this one's from yesterday. But he was talking on David Morgan here around the 20-minute mark. Let's see if I can grab him. Just kind of place it there. Talking about some of the changes that we're going to be seeing here in the United States to come, and maybe make some more sense for why we're seeing all these wars happen, what the fallout for the economic collapse is going to be, and potentially using his sage knowledge, you guys can see forward that these numbers aren't necessarily going to be false. We are going to be dropping from a $19 trillion economy to a $2 trillion economy, and dropping from 326 million to 99 million people, if you believe the numbers of the CIA, IMF, UN, USG, and all other major government agencies. This is the same numbers that the military itself uses to extrapolate data based on Census Bureau and GDP, to know where the geopolitical, turmoil is going to be. We're going from first to sixth. It's not that these are all going to be deaths. In fact, what we're seeing with this shift of technology is that the paradigm is going to be so chaotic on the public. And what we've also talked about with the pole shift, these technologies are coming out at a time that's incredibly crucial because they're life-saving too. Not only are they military applications, we're going to be able to have all these vehicles drive around everywhere, but because of the grand solar minimum that we've covered, because we're more going into an ice age than global warming has anything to do with anything, these numbers actually begin to make sense with the lens that Cliff High talks about as it relates to the exodus, that the war-torn refugees from Turkey, and the ones that have come up from Mexico for work, and all of the Islam people, the nation of Islam that has all the Muslim people that have come over as well are probably going to go back to the Middle East, is what he's saying, just because the weather. They won't be able to, a lot of this is, like we suspect, is going to be migration. There are going to be some people that die, of course, the older population that doesn't have the medical system to back them up anymore, and the insurance collapses. But more importantly, a lot of these people that make up our country are immigrants, and they're going to be going back to the countries that they originated from because they won't handle the cold, is what Cliff High is saying. So there's going to be some great stuff as it relates to a lot of what we're talking about in both of his interviews today. But the interview he had in particular, as it relates to number 17, again, it's too funny when it boils down to why V and why lambda, or why the V steganography exists, because of course we've already shown that it's occluding the lambda paradigm, and that represents ether, physics, torsion. But it's funny then that when you see in actual practice, in nature, the number 17 come up, because that's what he's talking about as two factions are, what he's describing in his video today is that there is a deep state CIA faction that's fighting a YouTube faction, but the debate is bunk because they're both using bunk data. They're not talking about the things you and I are discussing here on this channel. They're discussing all the false stuff like impeachment and things that aren't actually real, in addition to the atomistic, non-electric model of the universe to debate certain topics. And so they're miring their audiences just into this big, confused slurry. And critical thinking people like Cliff, like you, like me, we are, left to sit on the sidelines until these people on the right are willing to debate us in a more proper format. But what this 17-year chart basically means is that in consensus, what you have to gain in consensus in terms of a new paradigm happens in chunks over 17-year adjustment periods, which is to say that when a new thing gets inserted into the public for the first time, let's just be crazy. Steganography. Let's say Steganography, day and date 2020 was the first year that people really started talking about Steganography, day and date. We could measure that in 17 years, people would start easing into the topic a little bit more. They'd start accepting it a little bit more. You even saw us create this stuff with like chakras, when chakras were initially introduced in yoga. Oh my God, all of these paradigms are changing. If you measured the point of which people were trying to gain consensus because they were finding out something new, some new knowledge, it would take 17 years from that point for it to equal out for it to smooth out into an equilibrium for people to accept that new field perturbation, that new idea. And we're going to be experiencing these, he's saying, a lot in the 2020s. We're going to have these happening like every day. And we've already seen this. And this is what's so funny about this number 17 that comes out today, is as we're discussing this on the 17th, the other thing, I didn't even bring this up. Marshawn Lynch Combine. Check it out. Marshawn Lynch Combine. Let's get a photo of the kid. Here he is. What number is that? What number is he wearing there? What the heck? Number 17. Number 17. Yep. So, just had to bring that one up too. I mean, you guys are seeing how they do this really intricate stuff, I think. I've wondered how the heck they put these riddles together. But anyway, pretty interesting that this comes out of it too. Now, the next thing, the last thing I want to share, and I'm going to unmute this because Max, I guess got to get the correct timestamp. Where did I want to do 20-minute mark? So let me, again, this is actually funny because it's January 2nd, so there's another 12/20/20. You see how sometimes even the people that cover the news, end up resonating with those tones or frequencies just because they're catching, in my opinion, I think they're catching the harmonic that leads them to the information. But before, this is going to be the last thing to leave the video because it's kind of somber. What's happening in Australia sucks. And there are again, butting heads. Let's figure out what's actually going on here. There are too many people denying any truth that's happening out of there just because they're so pained by. Well, a lot of people are scarred by the Paradise Fires here in California and all the fuckery that happened with the directed energy weapons, and that's why I kind of point back to Judy Wood. Directed energy weapons do exist, but again, if we're going to figure this out and help the people that are actually going through this stuff, we're going to wade through the chaff, quite literally. So Max has put together some wonderful stuff, and I'm going to kind of go through some of the fallacies that we're seeing in the media because, unfortunately, this numerology and steganography paints pictures toward that end, and I see the same numbers popping up in this ritual. And it is a ritual on a massive scale with implications that, are killing people and animals. But Anyway, let's just hear what Max has to say.
Last season, for the last few years here in Australia, is we're all kind of hyping people up, getting them ready for this type of event to happen, getting it in their minds that summer is fire season. But,
And I guess give you a direction of what to listen for here. Listen what he's talking about in between the lines with the implications for the corporations. Remember, war is corporate interest theater, if you want to borrow that phrase.
Fires raging across Australia, more than 5 million hectares.
There's 5 again, 5 million hectares.
Yeah, the catastrophic fire season in California saw nearly 740,000 hectares burned. Australia's fire season began this year in late August. Fires have so far claimed 9 lives, blah, blah, blah. Destroyed 1,000 homes, suggested around 500 million animals have also died, including 30% of the koala population.
Pause right there too. He doesn't catch on this, but that again, 500. If we're going to talk steganography or numerology, zeros don't matter. But they're claiming 500 million animals have died, and that's in my opinion, that's a horseshit number. And we're gonna look at why this is just a total ritual and totally ridiculous, and how we need to wake up from it so we can, end this fiasco. But anyway.
It's actually a lot more than that, folks. Australia's climate has warmed, so they're really pushing the whole.
If you guys see right here in the article, this guy's 42. Australia's climate was warmed by 1 degree, and this change has caused an increase in the frequency and intensity of heat waves. I am 42. The author writes. There's another 42. This is everywhere. I'm telling you guys, the age of the people, it's all timed up, synced up with birth dates, distances between key events. It's the way this all works.
Climate change thing, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, have a look at this. Hundreds of bushfire victims to get no compensation after their homes are razed to the ground, leaving them to facing a life of destitution. You know why this is, folks? Do you know why? Experts say thousands of New South Wales residents do not insure their homes because state government taxes make it too expensive. And think about this. Why would it be, folks? New South Wales and Tasmania are the only jurisdictions in the country where emergency services are funded by tax on insurance companies. Think about that one.
So here you go. This is one of these keys for these economic mired Pandora's boxes that we're about to open. What he's saying there is insurance has been going up on homes progressively to the point where in Australia it's no longer affordable. That's important for 2 reasons that I'll get to, because first reason is as the article even alludes to, is that since in Australia and those provinces that it lists in particular, Tasmania one of them, if those insurance, if fewer people are buying insurance, then fewer taxes are being collected on the insurance. And since insurance taxes are what fund the emergency relief programs, like the ones that are supposed to fight the fire, there's not as much public funding to even get deployment out and ready to get all of the the firefighters mobilized and all this, to get the equipment mobilized. There's no money to maybe fill fuel up, right? And these are one of these questions people have been having. Where are they've got these big scoop boats that are just sitting there on the runways, and nobody's flying them, but they're the ones that scoop the water from the ocean and dump it, and nobody's flying these anywhere close. They're saying the fires probably have their own weather patterns, all this crap. And it's kind of ridiculous. But back to the point about the insurance, since now they can point to the fact that, okay, we don't have the rescue, but we also have displaced people, because no house insurance, burned down house, all your wealth is gone. Where do you go? Now you're homeless, literally. And this is interesting because this is also happening at the same time in the United States, where we have gluts of housing that is ready to go back into inventory, because we have baby boomers who have 5, 6, 7 houses, and there's going to be too much inventory. Millennials aren't buying them, and we have this thing called the Cantillon effect that's gone on since 2008 because of this whole Glass-Steagall thing that I'll share with you. The Cantillon effect refers to the change in relative prices resulting from a change in money supply. The change in money supply has a specific injection point and therefore a specific flow path through the economy. The first recipient of the new supply of money is in the most convenient position of being able to spend extra dollars before prices have increased. But whoever is last in line receives this share of new dollars after prices have increased. So let me break this down. The Cantillon effect refers to the change in relative prices referring to the change in money supply. Ergo, i.e., in 2008, when the TARP fund and the $700 billion bailouts passed through Congress, the Cantillon effect originated in the American population because the change in the money supply took place. $700 billion got added to the money supply. When the change of the money supply happened at a specific point, right at the top of the pyramid in the banks, it has a specific flow path through the economy. The specific flow path, of course, taking gravity down, starting with the bankers who have the money, then giving it out in loans, no interest rates, so they can just balloon these things out, make more derivatives. We have an even bigger problem than 2008 pretty soon, right? We've covered that. You can go to Bix Weir's website, roadtoruta.com, and learn all about that in great detail as it relates to commodities and the derivatives bubble that's likely coming in this next collapse. But in the Cantillon effect, since the first recipient of the new supply is in that position, he gets that money and he has no propensity to give it to anybody else. So what you have is this big ballooning upper class getting only richer since 2008, and they're buying all these hypercars, they're supercars, collector paintings, houses. Baby boomers are the ones that are getting this money. If anything, it's the rich baby boomers who got all this money. And therefore, the price of everything has increased in those asset classes. So those asset classes predominantly are the houses. And so since this glut of houses exists, how many Airbnbs do you have to have before you realize there are many, many, many more houses that exist than there are people that can or are willing to buy them? Millennials and Gen Z, spend their money on experiences more anyway, as Cliff High also talks about at the 50-minute mark in this. And so truly, who's going to be buying this stuff? It's a legitimate question. Well, you have to believe that in Australia, the same is happening, right? The exact same thing is happening. And could it be that convenient, destructive events like this can take away inventory woes from an economy that won't be able to handle inventory pretty soon, right? You got to start to think on this level in the United States too, with the fires that happened in California. You're thinking about this Cantillon effect, and this literally will make house prices collapse even further, because when you're holding on to these things as assets but nobody wants them, the value doesn't mean anything. Who cares if you have 7 houses if there aren't as many people in existence in the United States? Soon to be much, much less. By a whole order of magnitude, you're facing even more inventory issues than you thought. Because think about some of these other houses that Chinese investors have, Middle East investors have, especially Saudi investors. You start to see the compounding issue that is this credit default swap derivative. It's way beyond subprime mortgages this time, guys, way beyond it. And in Australia, this is, again, my supposition with the housing piece is it's a convenient way to get rid of this inventory somehow, force people off the land. Now, there are some key issues that are also needing to happen to explain is that climate change is not a thing. Of course, CO2 is a trailing indicator of these pole shifts. The oceans are going to start sucking that CO2 back up. They already have. And that's why a lot of these fish are dying. So the CO2 levels are already going to be on their way trending down. as we course into this next ice age. But with the Australia situation in particular, we got to look at some of the stuff, like the water shortages. The water shortages are a result also of the pole flip, but the water that Australia does have, again, corporate interests. As if you're going to watch Max Egan's video, I really recommend watching this whole thing. You'll find out the corporate interests are taking the water. It's bureaucrats for the most part, right? A lot of the guys that are fighting the brush, the way that the brush has to be maintained hasn't been done so since the 80s, and so now it's this 100-year effort to get it back to where the Aborigines used to fight the brush, do controlled burns, so this situation doesn't occur. And then, of course, the biggest thing is that you'll see by watching his video is that it's measurable that the aluminum, strontium, barium mixtures from the chemtrails that they're actually spraying, hoping to protect us from the pole shift, which is hilarious. When it all boils down to it, is landing into the ground and causing these massive accelerants. And this is where you're seeing a lot of the firefighters get blasted all of a sudden with these really. This is on. He actually has, I think, in this video. If you watch it to its entirety, there's a point where he shows the firefighters getting blasted. Yeah, I can show it just right here. This clip here, this part. This. Let me see.
This fire spread now. Look at this.
Just watch right here in this area and watch how quickly the fire spreads. It just blows up. Look at this. And there's just the whole thing is gone, and they have to put a heat blanket over the top of the window because it's getting too intense. Just overtakes them. All of a sudden, and the fire was 50 yards away. And look at this. It's just boom, boom, boom. So he has a guy in here actually. Maybe it wasn't this video, or maybe it was a different one. He has on his site. He goes over a guy's video who uses a bunch of different experiments to show what the soil packing would look like if this stuff were actually in there. The strontium, barium, aluminum, and it's an accelerant, just like, as you'd point out, is inside of an incendiary grenade. The aluminum, metal, and iron oxide compounds here mix up and creates this thermite, basically. So if you can think, they're like mini thermite particulates all the heck over the world in really high concentrations in Australia, where they've been spraying this stuff for years. They're using up all the water for the cotton and the fracking and all the corporate interests. They're taking that away and actually killing the entirety of the ecosystem. And I mean, I don't know why they'd be conflating this number either, but we got to get our heads around like stupid, media like Vox, which has got a V and an X in it. I wonder what they're hiding, right? With the Steganography. But here we got the 24 people killed again, 1,400 homes. There's the 14. These things are measurable, right? These things are measurable. I don't necessarily refute these. The thing I'm really concerned about is what they're doing. They're showing the emotional, pictures of all this. It is a tragedy that these animals are dying, but they're saying 1 billion animals died. Now, this will be the last thing I discuss because this video is getting a little bit longer in the tooth than I wanted it to. But hopefully we've gone over some good topics today. But there's a passage here that I'd like to read. Hold on just a sec. I gotta find it, and then I can't talk and look it up at the same time, I guess. But from 1946, and comes from Professor Frank Hibben. This book is The Lost Americans. And I'll just read you this passage and why I refute numbers that they report and why they're probably more ritualistic most of the time than anything. I guess what I'll say about these is I don't believe the exact numbers. I believe the magnitude of them. because of course it might be 21 people that died. It might be 28 people that died. If it doesn't jive with the Gematria, they're just going to put any old number there. And 24 is what they wanted, 1,400. This could have been 1,400. This could be 1,500. They're going to put 1,400 if they mean to put 1,400. But the magnitude, is it dozens? Is it thousands? Yes. Billions? Hundreds of millions for animals? This is where we're going to get into here. This is the Lost Americans. He's talking about the last ice age ending, the end of the Younger Dryas. Here he says, violent volcanic upheavals have been blamed for the tremendous ferocity behind the mass destruction of the Pleistocene animals, particularly in Alaska, and evidence of this fury has come from blackened layers of volcanic ash in both the Alaskan and Siberian regions. Yet, there seemed to have been far more to it than simply this. Hibben estimates, here you go, that over 40 million animals had died in the continent of America alone, while many species, such as giant beaver, sloths, mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, woolly rhinoceros, have become extinct almost overnight. And he goes on to describe in great detail the carnage of the Younger Dryas event. But I want you guys to notice something. 40 million animals. Now, the archaeological field that has studied the Younger Dryas event has studied the Younger Dryas event painstakingly for centuries to course through much of the coverage of the topsoil that is available to them, to get many data points to compare against other reference points on other points of the continent, as he says, the Americas. The point is, there's a massive amount of research and data available for them to arrive at this painstakingly over centuries, to arrive at this very carefully constructed 40 million animal death count, which happened in the Younger Dryas, which was an event that was endlessly more cataclysmic than this. And this is what I mean to share, is that fear porn sneaks in to this stuff, and it makes people paralyzed. And that's why I hope this stuff in 2020 and beyond is really for you guys, is if everybody could start looking at the world that you've been duped in terms of at least the information that you're fed, you're going to be in a lot better spot. And if you know the mechanisms of the occult, then you'll have a lot better tools at your disposal to get through this stuff and kind of know what's going on. But we got to have some common sense and general knowledge, right? Like the fact that people are just accepting that 1 billion animals have died. They went from 500 million yesterday to 1 billion today. Who's sitting around counting animals is what I want to know. Yeah. And they're reporting on this rather than the stuff that matters. It's because here's what I suspect. If you point enough attention toward the animals, the actual shit that people need to go storm the dams and, take back the country, they're kept subdued because they're left pointing in the wrong direction. This is a crisis that we need to save. Yeah, you do need to save some animals. You need to save your country, though. You need to take it back. They don't have weapons to do it, though. All the guns got taken. So, on that, the Lost Americans, pick it up. It's out of print if you can find a copy of it. Pick up a copy of Manufacturing Consent for all of the fundamental context that you might need for brainwashing in the media. And follow Ice Age Farmer's site too, because he's going to give you a lot of different techniques for surviving in the times to come for yourself. And don't pay attention. Yet another Lambda Steganography thing that I haven't, but another, January 12th, 2020, this guy's writing this article about Downey Jr.'s thing being awesome. I haven't seen it yet, but don't buy too much into the age of AI. There's the Lambda. Because AI is only as smart as the programmer who programmed it. And looking ahead, look at 44112. Of course, we've got the 112 here, the Soleimani. We've got the Soleimani 1112. The SEAHAWKS ritual continues. Got 112. They're playing the Packers, the G, of course, the 5G network as it relates to this new paradigm. So there's a lot going on here, guys. Though this is the other screen grab I shot from Australia. See the 17 deaths, 1,400 plus homes, 17 deaths. But that was before they upped it to 24. So you see how they're using all these specific numbers with this ritual. So Seahawks are tied in there somehow. I haven't done enough of the Gematria to see if they're destined for the Super Bowl, but it doesn't matter who wins the Super Bowl, as you know. It'll all be part of whatever ritual that these guys want at the top to bring out. I do think that, of course, the the space paradigm is good for us, but we've got to wake up. Even when they bring us out all this new tech, all this Nikola Tesla stuff, let's strengthen our resolve in our minds a little bit so we can be a little bit more contributory members of society after the 2020s are over too. Is what I would challenge. But anyway. Love you all, ultimately, and we'll leave it at there. Until next time.